Thank you all for coming to this training session. I wish we were in Rwanda, but Zoom will do, I guess. So this is a training session on collecting and reporting the costs of conservation interventions. And it's a 2-day session. So today we'll go through a lot of content, and then tomorrow we will do some exercises and have opportunities for discussion and questions about your context. So this session was developed with support from the Arthur and Elaine Johnson Foundation and the ASU Center for Biodiversity Outcomes. So my name is Gwenna Akona. I'm Assistant Director for the Center for Biodiversity Outcomes at ASU, and also an Assistant Research Professor in the School of Life Sciences there. So I've been doing a lot of work on conservation for the past 15 years or so, and have really gotten into sort of work on conservation costs and conservation costing in the past decade or so. So this course I developed with the help of several students in our group at ASU. And so in particular, Camila Guerrero-Pinada has developed quite a lot of the content that you'll be seeing today and tomorrow. She sadly, well, happily is not joining us because she is getting married. So she has pre-recorded a lot of content and I will work through it, but we can also send her emails next week if there's specific questions. Erin Murphy is also a PhD student in the department who has developed some of the work that we'll be talking about today, as is Katie Surrey, another PhD student who will be joining us later today to talk about her work. Jared Clements is my research assistant, and he helped me put together all of these PowerPoints and videos that we're going to attempt to make work today. I also had a lot of help from other people in the field who work on conservation costs. And so we have some recorded videos from Paul Armsworth, Jennifer McGowan, Vanessa Adams, Hugh Possingham, and Anna Roberto Segovia, who also work on costs and have contributed to this course. With any luck, this presentation, yes, okay, this video will work. This is a little introduction to the course from Professor Leah Gerber, who is the director of the Center for Biodiversity Outcomes at ASU.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Leah Gerber. I'm a professor in the School of Life Sciences at Arizona State University. I also direct our Center for Biodiversity Outcomes, which is a boundary organization that aims to bridge the divide between the production of science and the demand for science to create implementable solutions to address biodiversity loss. A key component of our approach is to engage decision makers in incorporating data to inform decisions. While the conservation community is beginning to tackle the problem of understanding what works in conservation, the question of what works must be considered in the context of the cost of alternative actions. And thus far, we do not have a systematic approach where we generally collect information on cost. Maybe in this effort. Our initial work does indicate that considering costs can actually help save more species from extinction. And documenting costs for alternative decisions makes biodiversity more salient to the business sector because cost is a relevant metric in this domain. So in this session, led by my colleague Gwenna Akona, we hope to engage you in our collective effort to improve the efficacy of conservation by explicitly incorporating cost. Enjoy.
Thank you, Leah. So a lot of the materials that we'll be going through today and sort of the work that has been done in conservation costing over the past few years, decades, whatever, I've been compiling to this website. I call it the Conservation Cost Data Portal. And I don't think you can click on the link on your video, but I did send the link yesterday to all the participants who were registered, and we'll put the link in the chat if we can. But a lot of the materials that we'll be talking about today are found on this portal, as well as we've been sort of compiling links to other cost studies that have been using cost information and sort of cost information in general that we hope will help the community. Next. So first module was about sort of costs in general, why should we care about them and what are we looking for? Second module, how do we report on cost data? And I go to reporting first because a few years ago, so ICCB 2015 in Montpellier, a group of us got together, and so this was 21 participants from 14 organizations in 4 continents, people who'd been working on conservation decision sort of science and practice, and been really struggling with this issue of like, how do we find good cost data? How do we use cost data in ways that sort of is meaningful and relevant? And so we did this workshop. It was associated with the conference. We did this workshop, 2-day workshop, where we sat down and we thought about what are sort of some standards for reporting on conservation costs that we can use as conservation scientists, and we can suggest to others so that the costs that are sort of reported in publications, in reports, are more consistent, more usable as a way to sort of take the first hack at dealing with these issues that we have with costs in the field of conservation. So essentially what we were trying to do was we were trying to get these 2 criteria, or at any rate, make some progress towards improving how costs in the literature and costs in the field, reported costs, were interpretable, so clearly described and sort of able to be used in multiple ways, and comparable. So if somebody is reporting on costs in one context, can somebody transfer them to a different context and say, no, their estimates of costs are relevant in my context as well. So that workshop resulted in this paper, which came out a couple of years ago, 2018, I think, in Conservation Biology. And this paper is targeted at conservation scientists and practitioners, so it's targeted at us. And it provides these standards for reporting on cost data in papers and reports. It includes a worksheet in the back of the paper that helps you think about the context, the costs that are being reported or being used in the context, and provides essentially, I think of it as metadata for any cost sort of analyses that are going on in the paper. And it provides just sort of the basic information about what is included in these data that were used to provide these estimates. So essentially, it's 5 standards. These 5 standards are gone over in detail in the paper. They are also now included in the instructions to authors for people who want to publish with the journal Conservation Biology. But what they're saying is, okay, if you want to put cost information in your paper, they should have these sort of 5 basic criteria so that readers and future users of this information understand this sort of basic set of information about those criteria, those costs. So the first standard is to state the objective and outcome of the costed intervention. So this just says, describe what the intervention was trying to achieve and the observed results. The second criteria, the second standard, was to define the context and methodology of the intervention. So this is saying, what was the intervention doing? So notice this is not about the costs yet. This is about the thing that the costs are estimating. This is about the intervention itself. And we're just providing some information that sort of contextualizes the numbers, the costs, so that future users have an idea of, is it relevant for their context? So here we're defining the context and methodology of the intervention. You want to sort of have some reporting of what is the intervention doing, what were the conditions that it was being applied under, and what are the sort of factors that could influence outcomes and the types of actions undertaken. And so this is just saying, you know, I always like to use invasive plant management as an example, but it's saying, you know, was the site that you are managing completely invaded to start out with, or was it sort of like an early on in the invasion process, since you were dealing with a lot lower level of invasion? The third standard is to state when, where, and at what scales interventions were implemented. So this is saying, okay, if I am sort of estimating the costs in my paper of some invasive species management intervention, am I talking about 1,000 acres? Am I talking about 1 acre? You know, it's giving some idea of the scale, so that if this number in your paper is really big, but it sort of represents a really large area, future readers, future users of these data can understand what exactly it is representing. So number 4, so cost reporting standard number 4 is to state which of the following categories of costs are included. And we use these 4 categories of sort of basic accounting categories, which we saw as being the ones that are most relevant to the conservation context, and also broad enough to sort of generally estimate. But when we talk about these categories, the idea here is to say, are these categories included in my cost estimate or not included in my cost estimate? So first of all, so there's 4 categories: labor, capital, consumables, and overhead. And work that has been done in conservation shows that often sort of labor is a very large contributor to the costs of the conservation intervention. So often conservation costs are primarily labor, but we want people to say that explicitly, right? So we want to say someplace in this metadata or in your paper someplace, say our estimates are only the labor costs, or they might include the capital, or they might include the consumables, or they might include the overhead. It doesn't matter for the costing really, but really what is important is that future readers know what categories were included and what categories were excluded. Standard 5 is state the currency and date for which costs were incurred. So is this a one-off project? Is it a long-term project? Are these ongoing costs? Is it a one-off cost? What currency are we talking about? What year were these data collected, or was it over multiple years? So these are just basic information enabling future users to be able to interpret those costs in context of sort of inflation and things. Okay, so I just wanted to summarize these 5 standards again. Essentially, what we were trying to do here was to just lay out the most basic recommendations for the sort of lowest level of information that should be included in cost reported costs in papers and reports. So I have another video now of somebody who has been working to use these standards in their research. Okay, are you going to work?
Hi, I'm Vanessa Adams, a researcher at the University of Tasmania, and I'm going to talk to you about an exciting industry partnered project we have with AirSeed, looking at different options for restoration. The UN has declared this the decade of restoration. Protecting healthy ecosystems is no longer enough. We have to revive damaged ones as well. But the task of restoration is often thought of as daunting, too big, too hard, too expensive. And so we've got to find new technologies that work in diverse environments. And we have to better understand their relative costs and benefits. That means having rigorous cost accounts that can tell us how much something costs in a complete cost accounting way, so that we can then determine what is most cost effective, taking into account both costs and benefits across diverse environments. Our project is taking a really exciting integrated approach to measuring the benefits as well as the costs of a technology for restoration. precision drone-based diverse plantings. The ultimate aim is to estimate the relative costs and benefits of precision seeding. And that means being able to then look at effectiveness analysis, comparing this new technology to traditional methods like tube stock planting. That way we can look at where this technology will work. If it really is cheaper, we think it will be. If it's going to be more effective, demonstrating that. And the role I'm playing in this team is to help to develop rigorous financial cost systems where we can track the full costs of our actions over time and across scales. This should give us the evidence base we are looking for to say whether our technology is cost effective and to demonstrate those additional benefits it'll bring. We're really lucky to be working with Airseed and their amazing technology. So I'm going to pass over to our colleagues there to talk about exactly what their technology is and why cost estimates are really important for them from a business perspective.
I am Dr. Charlotte Mills, and I'm the in-house scientist at Airseed, where I'm responsible for product development and lab and field trials to ensure that everything that we make can be used to effectively restore biodiverse vegetation communities. Airseed aims to provide an efficient solution to large-scale restoration through AI, drone tech, and plant ecology. By having a scalable and affordable solution to restoration, we limit the compromises that are necessary in traditional methods. We can plant a biodiverse range of species. We can do so in tough terrain or in inaccessible areas, and we can do it at large scales. As a startup, we are in the thick of research and development at the moment. It is becoming apparent that applications for our tech, once we have it fully functional, are going to be widespread and increasing. However, without an economic analysis of our approach compared to traditional methods like tube stock planting or direct seeding, we're going to have a hard time convincing decision makers, governments, corporate bodies, and landholders that our method is the best approach for their project. We want to provide best practice restoration techniques using innovative technology with rigorous cost estimates and economic comparisons to the status quo, along with our excellent science. Our business will have the security to say that what we offer is effective and competitive.
Great. I think that was really important to hear from our industry partners about why it's important to them, not just from an academic perspective, but from a business perspective. So I'm going to do a bit of screen sharing now and show you how we plan to go about doing this. We've decided to use the standardized reporting cost sheets that Gwen Iacona and others developed, myself included. And we're doing this because we think it's a really practical way to comprehensively track our own costs, but also to do it in a way that others can pick it up and interpret and apply. Do this log to say, look, what we've done is literally come to the journal website and gone to our supporting information where we've published guidelines for tracking these costs in a way that anyone can do so that it's comparable. We've also developed a really simple spreadsheet to put these in. Okay. So we are actually using this exact tracking spreadsheet, and we're following the guidelines to report on each and every one of these things. We will be creating one of these spreadsheets per year, per activity, so that we have an accurate cost accounting across time as well. As we know that sometimes costs do vary across time. We'll be doing this for our trial sites and looking to estimate scales of economy as well. So I say this for both actions, as in we're going to do this for the drone-based precision seeding alongside traditional methods like tube stock, so we can develop that true cost effectiveness comparison. So I hope that you've gotten a sense for what our project is trying to attempt, but also why cost estimates are a critical piece of the puzzle for designing conservation solutions that work in a range of environments that take advantage of limited funds, but also why they are important in a business sense for industry partners trying to lead the way with new technology to help us confront some of our conservation needs.
Thank you, Vanessa. So essentially what these standards are trying to do, and what Vanessa's little video I think was trying to send home, is that what we want to do is to make cost information accessible and available, and not just sort of haphazard cost information that is related back to the sort of intervention of interest. So in Vanessa's case, they're sort of trying to estimate or report on the costs of these different types of seeding technologies, so germ technology versus feedstock or tube stock, but record it in a way that is comparable across the two different types of interventions, and then report on it over time so that they can sort of track their costs of these projects in ways that are accessible to the community and analyzable for their research. So her example is great because sort of they're starting from the beginning and using these materials in the worksheet, in the supplemental material, to track their costs over time and as they are doing the project. But it's not likely that many other people can do that for projects that they've already got going on, right? So like, we've done a lot of work using these worksheets for reporting on existing projects or existing costs. And often there isn't all of the aspects of everything that the worksheet asks for in there, but filling it out as well as possible enables us to document what is and what is not included in the cost data reported, and provides this sort of, as I was calling it, metadata that is included with the papers or reports to describe the sort of attributes of the cost information in standardized and comparable ways across different reports and papers for future users to be able to use more confidently. I also did this module first because it helps us sort of understand some of the characteristics of what we might look for if we're sort of going out and collecting new data from scratch, or going out and sort of setting up a system to collect information into the future. And that's what the rest of our content today is. So essentially, I think of there being sort of these three different costing contexts when we're thinking about trying to determine what are the costs of a project. I noticed somebody put in the chat that when we're talking about conservation cost data, is it not just the project cost? And it depends on your decision, right? So it's like, are you trying to make decisions about sort of this type of project versus that type of project? Or is it this type of intervention versus that type of intervention? Is it a particular type of action versus a particular type of action? So you have to make those decisions. What is the appropriate sort of resolution of cost data for your particular context? But what we're asking is that it be sort of clearly laid out what resolution you're asking for. But so back to these costing contexts, I essentially see that there's three costing contexts where we can think about sort of starting a new project to collect some information, to use it in analysis to support a decision, or to sort of understand some more about a system. So the first context, which is what we will talk about shortly, is collecting data retroactively to estimate costs. So this is, say, there's something that's been going on. There is existing accounting systems out there, or people who've been working in the system that you can collect their receipts or ask them to estimate the costs for. So collecting data retroactively. There's also the context where, kind of like Vanessa's project, going forward, you're starting a new project, or you're trying to understand something about a system where you have the flexibility to sort of track costs as they happen. And so this is sort of designing new systems to collect data going forward. And that's a lot of what tomorrow's work will be. Finally, I think there's another context which is sort of predicting future costs. And often you have to have information from one of these two other contexts in order to do that. But we are not really going to get into predicting costs in the course today. I wanted to put it here because I think it is a important context that people need to be able to do, but it kind of depends on being able to collect some of this information in other ways. So anyway, I mentioned it, but we're not going to talk any more about predicting costs. We're just talking about collecting costs.